I think we could go a long way towards shoring up our tattered financial system if the SEC simply banned the SKF. That's a hideous instrument called the UltraShort Financials Pro Shares. I call it the ETF of mass banking destruction. It allows buyers to get $2 of short-selling firepower for every dollar they put down. And if the government reinstated the Uptick rule, a regulation that forced short sellers to wait for a stock to trade higher and uptick before they could slam it down, before they could annihilate it bad. Just 2 strokes of a pen, and we'd be on much firmer footing. I know why it's not happening. There's a whole cohort of purists, technicians, short sellers who don't want either of these things to happen. I think these people live in a magical kingdom, a fairy tale world where there's no sin or market manipulation. They totally ignore the wholesale destruction of not just ne'er-do-well Citigroup, but Bank of America, Wells Fargo, U.S. Bancorp, and J.P. Morgan. Just about every other bank you can name. Destruction that was particularly egregious in today's miserable action because there's no Uptick rule and because these ultra-short financials are pulverizing every financial in their path. The short sellers, traders, theoreticians, regulators, academics, it's kind of a complex, all worry about ridiculous things like, are you ready? The rights of short sellers to make a profit at your expense instead of, say, having a working financial system that isn't nationalized by the government. These defenders of the SKF and opponents of the Uptick rule want the government out of their trading lives. But they might not realize, ironically, they're putting the government foursquare, great driveway game, in their business lives. Because given the destruction of the common stocks of banks, which somehow under this administration is all that matters to their solvency, they're going to get a level of government interference they would never, ever believe. Look, I hear all of the arguments, all of them. The buyers of stocks have it both ways, so the shorts should too. The Uptick rule is outmoded by penny trading, and new studies show it doesn't matter. The SKF is a fitting way to get negative trading done on the banks. But I got to ask you, are these really imperatives for our great nation in a time of peril? Of course, I hear the other argument, too, that the banks are all so troubled they deserve to go down. They're all in the same boat. Come on, does anyone really believe that? Does anyone truly think that the common stock of each and every bank is worthless and they're all run by idiots, albeit useful ones if you're short? Please. I have to believe that the people making these arguments just aren't cognizant of the history behind the rules. The Uptick rule and the margin rules weren't created to make trading less efficient. That's not an imperative. Now we can do away with them to be more efficient. Is that what we're about? They weren't implemented because we, the regulators, wanted to make it so that the longs could make money and the shorts couldn't. The rules were put in, well, because it was too easy for the shorts to utterly destroy the common stocks as they did in the late 20s and early 30s. They were put in to stabilize things. It was just too easy to stop capital from flowing into the markets and annihilating their functions. The government held hearings during the Great Depression, recognized that it wasn't in the national interest to allow the shorts to sow fear and collude to bring down stocks, wreck the capital markets. That's why the rules were created, not to stymie the hedge funds from making as much money as they can off of you. That wasn't the interest. They didn't even have hedge funds then. They made sense back then because they are not about efficiency of trading, but they're about human nature. They make sense now because human nature hasn't changed. It's easier to spread fear and panic than it is calm. It is easier to get people to jump out windows and sell than it is to get them to feel elated and buy. Now, has anything changed in terms of that goal? You might as well ask, has anything changed in terms of mankind? Here's the two competing agendas: the rights and privileges of the short sellers, mostly hedge funds, to make huge profits by wrecking stocks, versus the government's interest in having an orderly capital market system that functions and allows banks to raise money. Which one? You tell me. Which one sounds more important? Which one is grounded in history? Which is the one that sounds like it's constitutional? Which is the one that just sounds like it's egregious and false? Now, the shorts will tell you that throughout the world, the same thing's happening to all banks. Well, is that the excuse? I'm not saying that all banks should be preserved or that many banks shouldn't be seized. I'm simply saying that it's empirically obvious that not all banks in the country are insolvent, even though virtually all of them trade as if they are, because it's so easy for the shorts to sow the panic and fear. That was what the legislators recognized in the 30s. They didn't want it to happen again. They didn't want a second Great Depression. Well, guess what? And it's not like the regulators were unsophisticated back then, or the congressman. The first SEC chairman was Joe Kennedy. He was FDR's fox guarding the henhouse, who favored the rules because he had been one of the biggest short-selling winners. He knew how effective short selling without upticks had been in undoing the stock market, ruining the banks, and causing the Great Depression. The government also understood that excessive margin, too much buying stocks with borrowed money, creates an untenable amount of volatility. So it gave the Federal Reserve the power to regulate it. The pro-bear ultra funds like the SKF, they're simply taking advantage of an uptick rule and exploiting a hole in the margin rules. The impact, same today as it was in the 30s. Stocks, especially bank stocks, get mutilated. And maybe we have a second depression? I think we need to retreat to the rules that work so well for so long. Forget about these academic studies that were done during the greatest bull market of all time that purport to show that the uptick really doesn't matter. Forget the pleas of the hedge funds. Please, totally irrelevant. You want to know the truth about the defenders of the SKF and short selling with no upticks? You want to know the truth? As a former hedge fund manager who played by the rules and had to abide by the uptick rule, let's just say I suspect their motives. Remember, I was a hedge fund manager for 14 years. I'm not making this stuff. I'm not a reporter. The people who are excusing themselves, telling you that these rules should stay, they're driven by profit, not process. And the repeal of the uptick rule combined with the SKF, these were the greatest profit-generating events in the history of modern short selling. So the stuff about protecting the rights of the short sellers, blah, 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 please, they're just protecting their bottom line. Our bottom line, what's more important to you? The rights of short sellers to be able to destroy stocks at will and drive us into another depression? Or having a functional banking system? It's outrageous even that this is a question, isn't it? Then again, maybe it's not all that worth worrying about anymore. A couple thousand more points, and it just won't matter. Stay with Cramer.